In Episode 1, Prisoners of the Drow, player characters find themselves chained in a slave pen of a remote Dark Elf outpost. They get to know a bunch of other prisoners, they are forced to do some hard labor for the Drow, and get a chance to abuse and intrigue among the ranks of their captors. The goal of the episode is to escape. You're watching Lutes&Dice, and I'm your bard, Folkart. Deep beneath the surface of the world lies the Underdark, a realm of endless labyrinthine tunnels and caverns where the sun never shines. The Underdark is filled with races and creatures too numerous to count or list, and foremost among these are the Dark Elves, the Drow. Hated and feared even by their fellow dwellers in darkness, the Drow raid other settlements in the Underdark as well as the surface world, taking prisoners back with them. Rendered unconscious with Drow poison, then collared and shackled, these prisoners are eventually sold as slaves or entertainment in the Dark Elves' subterranean cities. The adventurers have all had a misfortune of falling to such a fate. The character's ultimate goal in this chapter is fairly straightforward: escape the Drow outpost of Velkinvelv. And even though the book provides us with pretty clear ways to let that happen, we want the PCs to get a fair taste of the Drow's cruelty, to get familiar with the NPCs and eventually possibly come up with their own way to escape. The Scavenge Possession section is a nice way to kickstart the player's creative thinking. Some of the items seem fairly useless, but you never know where the player's imagination can bring them. Just remember to be open for suggestions and reward creative thinking if possible. One thing I have to mention as soon as possible is that the slave pen has magical wards preventing spells from being cast within the cave. It's really easy to forget. The most bulky chunk of the chapter is the prisoners, and perhaps the most important. It also contains the most work for the DM. You want to get very familiar with these characters, as some of them, the ones you prefer, will very likely become long-term sidekicks in your campaign. Some of them play a bigger part in the upcoming events of the future chapters. Some don't matter at all. Let's have a closer look at each one of them. Buppido. The Darrow are degenerate Underdark humanoids that resemble small dwarves. Cruel and insane, they take delight in tormenting others, even their own kind. Darrow have blue-gray skin and straight hair that is white or yellow in color. Their uniformly pale white eyes lack both irises and pupils. Darrow believe they were created by their god, Dirinka, but they're actually the result of cruel experiments on dwarves by mind flayers. Like Duergar, the Darrow were a slave race to the mind flayers, but eventually freed themselves. The process of their creation rendered the Darrow irrevocably insane. Buppido is no exception to this, but he is very good at concealing his insanity. He secretly believes he is the living incarnation of the Darrow god Din Karazhan, an avatar of murder, offering bloody sacrifices to create a path of carnage through the Underdark for his people to follow to glory. Buppido appears as a very nice and talkative old man until one day the dark truth is revealed, and when that day comes is up to you, but keep in mind that the canonical conclusion to his story lies in Gracklstugh, when the party discovers Buppido's lair. If they defeat him there, they get a chance to know a spirit of a dead deep gnome that can point them towards Blingdenstone. Nothing super important, but nevertheless, it's there. Prince Derendil is a very fun character. He's a Quaggoth who believes to be a cursed elven prince of a made-up kingdom. Derendil seems to know only Elvish, which might nudge some players to start believing him, but in reality he is indeed insane. The insanity was caused by the Demon Lord Fraz urb'luu. The Demon Lord himself is currently trapped inside of a gem that rests in Mantol Derith. In fact, quite a few people are touched by his madness by the time the party arrives there. They will have a chance to destroy the gem and send the Demon Lord back to the Abyss, but it appears that the madness will last no matter what until cured. Prince Derendil is a very useful combat asset at the early stages of the game, but he's also quite dangerous as he's prone to losing himself in acts of uncontrollable violence. A really interesting character, but otherwise his story has no defined conclusion in the book. Eldeth Feldrun is a dwarf scout from Gauntlgrim. She's arguably the most normal NPC out of the bunch, although she truly hates the corrupt dark dwellers such as Darrow and Duergar. She strongly suggests Gauntlgrim as the destination to reach after the escape, although she's obviously just as lost in the region as the party. Jimjar is a fairly unusual deep gnome because of his lively demeanor and playful nature. He is obsessed with betting on things, but always true to his word and always pays his debts. Be sure to check out the Getting Started video to find out about the optional plot twist regarding Jimjar, or or simply have a look at the sidebar on page 217. Ront is probably the most bland character. He is simply an orc, and a fairly typical one. He can serve as a nice material to showcase Ilvara's cruelty. He may cause some trouble and get fed to one of Ilvara's giant spiders. Sarith Kzekarit is a drow accused of murdering one of his fellow drow warriors. He is confused regarding whether it's true or not, which in fact it is. Sarith is infected with tainted spores from myconids corrupted by Zagatmoy, the demon queen of fungi. He's pretty gloomy, keeping to himself most of the time, not even mentioning the fact that as a drow he probably considers that engaging with inferior races is below him. But as a funny detail, you can have him act in an unusually friendly manner towards Stool. This will surely raise some brows among the players. The drow's story reaches its apogee in Neverlight Grove, which is the destination of his suggestion, as well as home to Stool. Shuushar the Awakened. Being a complete pacifist, Shuushar has a potential to be the most useless NPC for the party. Nevertheless, Shuushar is a very fun character to play and interact with, and he, in a way, can serve his role later if the party decides to visit the Kuotoa village of Slubludop. Stool. One of the most exotic members of the cast, Stool is a myconid sprout. Myconids are intelligent, ambulatory fungi that live in the Underdark, seek enlightenment, and deplore violence. If approached peacefully, myconids gladly provide shelter or allow safe passage through their colonies. Myconids are usually very neutral beings. Being fairly weak as a fighter, Stool will prove extremely useful due to his Rapport Spores ability, which allows creatures within the cloud of spores to communicate telepathically. Finally, we have the Deep Gnome twins, Topsy and Turvy. These two act more normal in the context of their race compared to Jimjar. They mostly keep to themselves, especially Turvy. But of course, the most interesting fact about the pair is that they are were-rats. They have been infected only recently, which means they are still not in control of their transformations. And within a month, when the full moon rises, even though it is unseen in the Underdark, it will cause the curse to surface. The best ending of their storyline would be to unite them with their kin in Blingdenstone, but the road would probably take more than a few months. So if you don't want them to get killed by the party, you better make Topsy and Turvy really likable and worthy of saving. So you want to get really familiar and comfortable with these NPCs, as you never know which one will provoke the most interest in your players. At the end of the day, the characters, the people, are what makes the stories memorable, and these NPCs are quite well written, and some of them have the potential to become good friends with the party. My advice would be to think of a few scenarios to run in the slave pen that would help unfold the personalities of the prisoners naturally, without players actively talking to them. For example, the following situation might occur. Stool eats its soup or whatever they're being fed, which, by the way, I would imagine Stool would just absorb the food with its body, because does it even have a mouth? Anyway, Stool tries to eat, and Ront, being a bully, decides to take the myconid's portion away, which makes Sarith defend the little fellow. This is a pretty elegant way to show the story rather than tell. What can prove to be a living hell is tracking all the stat blocks in case of battle. Even a skill check will make you flipping through the monster manual back and forth, which is why you want to prepare by either taking screenshots of the stat blocks or printing them out. You can find neat little cards for all the NPCs in this chapter on Lutes&Dice Patreon. These will make your life throughout the entire campaign a lot easier. More opportunities to learn the NPCs' personalities would be by doing various chores with them. You can plan this ahead, who will be assigned for what labor exactly, and how you will divide the PCs among these groups. Yes, I think splitting the party here is the way to do it. This way they will explore the outpost quickly, and it will overall serve as a more lively narrative. Just remember to switch between the scenes often enough to keep everyone engaged. Drow characters. Velkinvelv is run by Ilvara of House Mizrim, the fourth house of Menzoberranzan. She hates the job, but she of course can't fail it, because this will put an end to her career, which is why she will frantically try to catch the prisoners after their escape. Of course, Drow being Drow try to backstab each other left and right. There is a sort of an intrigue boiling within the high ranks of the Drow, but it's quite difficult to play with. Besides Ilvara, there are three key Drow characters. Asha, a young ambitious priestess who wants to be in charge of the outpost. Shoor, Ilvara's young lover, arrogant and swaggering. And Jorlan, Ilvara's former lover, whose face was damaged in a fight with a black pudding. So now Shoor walks around annoying the living hell out of Jorlan. Asha acts sympathetic towards the injured drow, but Jorlan knows that she's trying to manipulate him to get to Ilvara. Still, he eventually decides to sabotage Ilvara by freeing the prisoners. Jorlan's betrayal can happen regardless of the party's actions, so getting them familiar with the intrigue and conflict among the drow is more of a matter of flavor. This can be achieved by accidentally eavesdropping during the very moment Asha plants a seed of betrayal in Jorlan's head, or noticing Shoor's arrogant behavior towards Jorlan. Another way you want to use the drow is to make use of Ilvara somehow. If a sketchy behavior of one of the prisoners gets noticed, such as stealing or not doing their work, maybe let Ilvara torture them for a good part of the day, showcasing her tentacle rod, perhaps even bringing them to 0 hit points a few times only to bring them back with cure wounds. Whether you decide to use Jorlan's betrayal to help the players escape or not, I think inviting the demons to the party is a nice touch in any case. It can be done in a variety of fashions, but one way to do it is to have the escaping prisoners be confronted by the drow, and possibly almost losing when the demons show up, scaring the living hell out of everyone and providing chaos to the situation. This is another moment to kill off some of the NPCs if you think 10 of them will be too many for you to run. But of course, this is the most extreme option, as you can always have them just go another way and still be available later in the game, when your party visits all those places the NPCs end up in. So finally your party has to decide which way to go. The North Passage leads towards Menzoberranzan and Blingdenstone. Now, it doesn't mean that they will have to go through the city of Drow to get to Blingdenstone, and getting to Blingdenstone is actually the fastest route to the surface, but this also means that the party will most likely skip all other locations like Slublidop, Reckelstock and Neverlight Grove. They can always explore them if they want, but there will be no actual need to do that. If you aren't set on playing through every last thing the book has to offer, I would say that you should go with this route. The West Passage leads towards the Dark Lake, and from there the party will have the opportunity to continue their journey in almost any direction they would desire. Also, choosing this passage will almost certainly lead them into Slublidop, where they will witness the appearance of Demogorgon, so this is a very cool option. The South Passage will get the party to Greckelstock. While Greckelstock has a lot of cool content to play with, this is a huge and confusing chapter that will have your party occupied for quite a few sessions, and eventually doesn't really help with any long-term goals, besides perhaps gaining some levels. In any case, choosing the route doesn't mean the direction is set in stone forever. However, changing the destination might slow the party enough for the pursuers to catch up with them. I think we're done with the chapter. If you have any questions or stories to share, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.